He never entered a bank wearing a mask. He never pointed a gun or threatened a cashier. According to the story that made him famous, Frank Abagnale Jr. simply walked in, smiled, handed over a check, and left with the money. Before his 21st birthday, he claimed he had impersonated a pilot, doctor, lawyer, and professor while passing millions in fraudulent checks around the world. There was only one problem. Large parts of it may never have happened. Frank was born in New York in 1948. After his parents separated, he began committing fraud as a teenager. His real crimes included false identities, theft, and bad checks. In the 1960s, banking was slower and less connected. A check could be cashed in one city before anyone elsewhere knew it was worthless. Identification was easier to fake, and a confident young man could vanish by traveling to another state. Frank understood something more valuable than any weapon. People trusted the uniform, the title, and the person who acted as though he belonged. The uniform became the center of his most famous trick. Frank said he contacted Pan American Airways, claimed his pilot's uniform had been lost, and obtained a replacement. Dressed as a captain, airport staff assumed he was legitimate. Banks were less suspicious of a check presented by a pilot. He claimed he used the uniform to fly free around the world, riding in spare cockpit seats and passing fraudulent checks in dozens of countries. He said he logged millions of air miles while pretending to work for Pan Am. The image was irresistible. A teenage runaway moving through airports like a professional, while the FBI remained one step behind. Then the story grew. Frank claimed he supervised medical interns at a Georgia hospital, despite having no medical training. He said he passed the Louisiana bar examination and worked in the state attorney general's office. He also described posing as a lecturer and recruiting young women for a fake airline program. These claims turned an ordinary fraudster into something much larger. He appeared to prove that confidence could defeat entire institutions. But official records tell a less cinematic story. Researchers compared Frank's claims with court files, prison documents, newspaper reports, and employment records. During periods when he said he was traveling freely, he appears to have been in prison. Pan Am said he had never worked for the airline. No reliable record showed that he had been a Louisiana lawyer. The hospital career was also challenged. His documented fraud was real, but the scale was far smaller than the legend. Instead of stealing millions from giant banks across 26 countries, evidence indicates that many known victims were individuals and small businesses. One family said he stayed in their home under a false identity and stole from them. That version was not charming, it was personal. The manhunt also looked different outside the movie. The FBI confirms that Abagnale passed bad checks in the United States and abroad before French authorities arrested him in 1969. He served time in France and Sweden, then returned to the United States and received a federal prison sentence. But Hollywood's long personal chase appears heavily dramatized. The most successful part of Frank Abagnale's career may have begun after prison. Once released, he started speaking about fraud and advising banks and businesses. He presented himself as someone who understood deception from the inside. In 1980, his autobiography, Catch Me If You Can, transformed those stories into a best-selling legend. Steven Spielberg's 2002 film brought that legend to millions. Leonardo DiCaprio played Frank as a brilliant teenager, while Tom Hanks played the federal agent chasing him. The film was never a court record, but it made the story feel true. By then, the strangest part of the case was no longer the forged checks. It was the possibility that a man famous for fooling people had also fooled publishers, audiences, companies, and Hollywood about the size of his crimes. Frank has defended his version for decades, while researchers argue that evidence does not support many of his best-known claims. What remains certain is that he committed fraud, was arrested in France, served prison time, and later built a career speaking about financial crime. What remains uncertain is how much of the adventure existed outside his own storytelling. And that changes the meaning of the title. The man who stole millions without a gun may not have stolen those millions from banks. His greatest prize may have been attention, trust, and ownership of a story the world wanted to believe. If you enjoy true stories, where the legend is only the beginning, subscribe to OpenVerdict. Because the perfect con is not always convincing someone to hand over money. Sometimes it is convincing millions of people that the con was greater than it really was.